In 1970, Ford promised America the simplest car it had ever built. Cheap, light, carefree. It sold over 3 million of them. And the part that would undo it all cost $11. By the end, that $11 decision would put Ford in front of a jury staring at a number no car maker had ever seen: $125 million. This is the story of the little car Ford built too fast. It started with a deadline, not a design. By the late 1960s, small Japanese cars, the Corolla, the Datsun 510, were quietly taking the American road. Ford's president, Iacocca, drew a line in the sand. He wanted a car under 2,000 pounds, under $2,000, and he wanted it now. Inside Ford, they didn't call it the Pinto. They called it Lee's car. The industry took an average of 43 months to bring a car from idea to showroom. Iacocca gave his team 25. It would be the fastest car program in the company's history, and that speed would cost them. To hit the deadline, Ford did something unusual. They froze the design early, then built the factory tooling before the engineering was finished. Once the steel presses were cut, changing the car meant scrapping millions of dollars in machinery. So the design held, including one quiet decision. The fuel tank sat just behind the rear axle, only a few inches from the back of the car. It met the standards of the day, but it left almost nothing between the tank and a bumper the courts would later call the flimsiest on any American car. Nobody flagged it. The schedule didn't allow for second thoughts. And for a while, none of that mattered, because the Pinto worked. It launched on September 11th, 1970, under a tagline that would age badly: the little carefree car. Henry Ford II bought one himself. America bought 100,000 in 4 months. By 1974, Ford was building more than 500,000 Pintos a year. It was cheap, it was honest, it did exactly what a young family or a first-time buyer needed. For most owners, it was simply the car that got them to work. They had no reason to look underneath, but the reports had already started. In 1973, a few field reports reached Ford's recall office. Pintos, struck from behind at low speed, were catching fire. The man who inherited the case had about 100 active recall campaigns on his desk. By the rule book, a problem only became a recall if it happened often enough, or traced cleanly to a single defect. The early data was thin. His group looked at it twice, and twice voted to do nothing. The car met Ford's own standards. There was no outside standard that said otherwise, so the file stayed closed. But somewhere else inside Ford, a different document was being written, one that would define the entire story. That same year, Ford's safety engineers prepared a report for the government. Its purpose was to argue against a tougher fuel system rule. To make the case, they did what the industry and regulators did at the time. They put a price on it. The math was cold. Fixing the fuel systems across every car and light truck on the market would cost $11 a vehicle, about $137 million. The estimated benefit, in lives and injuries spared, came to $49.5 million. On paper, the fix cost almost 3 times what it saved. And to do that math, someone had to assign a number to a human life. They used the government's own figure, $200,000. Ford filed it and moved on. They had no idea they had just written the most damaging document in the company's history. For 4 years, that memo sat in a file. Then, in August of 1977, a magazine called Mother Jones got hold of it. The article was titled, "Pinto Madness." It accused Ford of knowing the car was a fire trap and choosing payouts over a fix. It claimed hundreds had burned to death. The day it ran, consumer crusader Ralph Nader stood in Washington and held a press conference. The article even printed a coupon readers could mail to the government demanding action. The numbers in that story would later be challenged, badly, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. The very next day, the government opened a formal investigation, and this time, the file would not stay closed. In May of 1978, regulators reached their verdict. The Pinto's fuel system was defective. The tests they used to prove it was brutal, a heavy car, weighted at the nose to slide under the Pinto, headlights on, tank filled to the brim. Critics said almost no small car of the era would have passed it, but the public didn't want nuance. On June 9, 1978, Ford gave in and recalled 1.5 million Pintos, plus 30,000 of their Mercury twins, the Bobcat. It was one of the largest recalls in American history, and it was only the beginning of the bill. Because while the recall was being negotiated, a case was already moving through a California courtroom. A teenager named Richard Grimshaw had survived a Pinto fire. Barely. His lawyers had something no one else had yet seen in court: the $11 memo. When the jury heard that Ford had weighed the cost of a fix against the cost of lives, they did something no jury had done to a car maker. They awarded Grimshaw $2.5 million in damages and $125 million more, purely to punish Ford. $125 million. The judge later cut the punishment to $3.5 million. But the message had already gone out to every boardroom in America. Put a price on a human life in writing, and a jury will make you pay for it. Then it went further than money. That same summer, 3 teenagers died when their Pinto was struck from behind in Indiana. And the state did something unprecedented. It charged Ford, the corporation itself, with reckless homicide. It was the first time in American history a company stood criminal trial for the design of a product. Newspapers called it the most important business case of the century. But the law had a catch. The statute was too new to cover the original design. Prosecutors could only argue Ford had failed to fix the car fast enough. The documents that made Grimshaw so damning were ruled out. And in March of 1980, the jury came back. Not guilty. Ford had lost the headline, but won the trial. So, how many people actually died? Not the hundreds the magazine claimed. The government documented 27 deaths tied to Pinto rear-end fires, a real and serious number, but a fraction of the myth. Scholars later pointed out a Pinto transmission flaw quietly caused just as many and never became a problem at all. The Pinto's real failure wasn't that it was uniquely dangerous, it was that Ford got caught putting the math on paper, and the cost of that went far beyond one car. The Pinto was finished in 1980. Forbes and Time would brand it one of the worst cars ever made, not for how it drove, but for what it represented. While Ford spent the decade in court, the cheap, reliable Japanese cars it had rushed to beat walked straight through the door it left open. The Pinto changed how companies are sued, how safety is regulated, and how every executive thinks before writing a number down. Ford had wanted the cheapest car in America. In the end, the $11 they saved became the most expensive decision the company ever made.